So, I'm assuming that you've probably seen the drama with the Tarte Shape Tape Foundation.
I think my skin's really dry today because it's sitting weird. I think it's because I washed my face and then put tea tree oil on it. That's so strange. That's never happened before with this concealer. I'm not going to be able to see that. It's just weird.
Okay, so, basically, not to get in depth on it, but they exclude people of color from their color ranges. Like, they have 10,000 shades of white, and then they have 2 shades for darker skin. They try and pretend they have 3, but if you watch people of color swatching those 3, you can see that the lightest one is still a white people color, like a white person's color, like with a tan. Like if I had a tan, I could use that color. That's how light it is. And Liv Loves Her Makeup did a great video on it, and she's boycotting Tarte, and she even started a Project Pan with all Tarte stuff. I'm already panning the Tarte birthday gift. The only other Tarte item I own is the Rainforest of the Sea palette, and the reason I wanted to talk about it is the Rainforest of the Sea palette is I really wanted it, and I put it on my Christmas and birthday list last year or the year before.
And it was the year before last. It was 2016. Well, no, I don't know. It might have last year. Well, it doesn't matter.
I wanted it for either my birthday or Christmas. So Christmas passes, and I didn't get it. And I thought it would be limited edition. I think it was limited edition. I don't know what it is now. But at the time, I was like, I'm going to miss the opportunity to use that or to have it. I really want it. I'm going to buy it. I think, did I have a discount for it? No. I paid full price for it. My birthday comes around in February. And my parents come up to see me because I'm at college. So they come up to see me. And I'm opening my gifts, and I open this, like, palette-shaped box, like it's a square. I forgot that it was on my list of things I want, because the way I do it is like a Christmas and birthday list together. So I forgot it was even on the list. I open it, and I look, and I'm like, oh my god, it's the palette I bought already. So apparently my mom had bought it during the Sephora sale with my other gifts. And I had then bought it myself. And the thing is, if I want makeup between Christmas and my birthday, I tell my mom what it is I'm getting just in case. She just forgot that she got that specific palette, which isn't her fault. So she was like, yeah, go ahead and get it. So
I bought it, and then, oh god. Sorry, I knocked the camera. I don't know if I'm in focus or anything.
So I open the palette, and I'm like, oh my god, I already own this. So I look up to my mom. She's like standing there, and I'm like, oh, I already have this. And then, like, she gave me a confused look on her face, but the way I interpreted it is she looked upset because nobody wants to give someone a gift and watch them open it, and instead of excitement, have them look at you and say, oh, I already got it. So I interpreted it as she was kind of upset, and that made me feel so bad. So then I, like, pulled out the palette I had, and I showed it to her, and I explained to her I bought it in...
Did I get it? Did I get it in October? You know what happened? The sale happened in November. I think I purchased it in October after I gave her the list before she went shopping. I could be wrong. So I think I gave her my Christmas and birthday wish list, and then I bought that palette before she even bought anything. I could be wrong.
Whatever. The point is, I paid full price, and she paid the 20% off price. And I didn't know until February, because that's when my birthday is. And so now, like, it's fine, because she was able to return it, and we got the money back, the sale price money back, so I still paid the full price for the one I have. But, like, and she was like, honestly fine with it, and she let me spend that money on something else. So I got a gift, like, I got stuff instead of it, and it was fine. Like, and she's like, don't worry about it, it's fine. It was just an accident. It doesn't matter. But to me, like, even though she said that, every time I look at that palette, the first thing I think of is, like, I have the picture in my mind of the look on her face when I told her I already had the palette. And it just makes me feel so bad every time I think about it. And, like, I know that's, like, a silly thing to be upset over. But it really upsets me every time I think about it. And it makes me feel so bad that I did that. I don't know. It's just, like, because, like, my mom is my best friend. And I love her so much. And to see her look upset like that, like, I don't think it was that emotionally significant to her. But to me, the way I interpreted it in that moment, it just, like, made me feel so awful. And then, like, reliving that moment every time I look at the palette just isn't a good experience. So the fact that now I feel like there's an opportunity for me to pan all my Tarte stuff, which would be just the blush and the palette, I kind of feel like I should do it. Like, I feel like I'm really unhappy with Tarte being a company that consistently excludes people of color. I just feel like I'm too aware of the type of discrimination that occurs in, I mean, I guess around the world, but in the United States especially, because racism isn't what it used to be. There's, like, old racism and new racism, and new racism is more about not so explicit discrimination and just exclusion in color range in foundations is just a small example of a bigger problem. And I just really am not interested in supporting brands that are a part of it. I'm sure the people that work at Tarte don't think they're racist, and that's fine. Like, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, I would rather purchase from brands like Fenty Beauty or other brands that have a range of color that makes sense to me. And I understand that there are drugstore brands that have very limited ranges, but I think for me, when I go to a drugstore, they don't give drugstore brands a lot of space for foundations unless it's, like, the really big brands. But I'm talking about cruelty-free brands. I don't pay attention to what the non-cruelty-free brands do. But for, like, Physicians Formula, they have a really small shade range. But when I go into drugstores, I only see, like, one foundation available. And they don't even have, like, shelving across. Like, it's not a row. It's, like, where the hook sticks out. And it's just, like, a bunch of them stacked on there. So it's, like, they don't get to have an entire shelf space for it to begin with. So I understand having a small range. I do think they should have an online range that's larger, but to an extent, I think it's justifiable for drugstore brands. But for Tarte Cosmetics, here's the thing. And Liv Loves Her Makeup pointed out this was one of the most anticipated foundations, like, ever. Like, the Shape Tape Concealer is so popular. You would think that they would have a foundation to go along with each concealer. But I guess, I have to double check, but the Shape Tape has a larger color range, I think. And the foundation has, like, nothing. Like, it was so anticipated, they had the money to do it. And she pointed out how, like, they send all these people on trips. Like, Tarte has the money. I don't know if they're a multi-million-dollar company or billion. They have a fuck ton of money. There's no reason for them to not have a good shade range. So the fact that they have 50 shades of my skin color with, like, touch different, like, undertones or whatever is just ridiculous. and they know it. Like, and then they're like, oh, so there's some false information going around. So they say, oh, we're coming out with 10 new shades. They're not coming out with 10 new shades. They're coming out with 5 new shades. One for the matte formula and one for the not oily, luminous, whatever fucking non-matte foundation. So white people right off the bat get 137,000 fucking options immediately. But if you're a person of color, if you're anything darker than me, you have to wait, and you get 7 total shades per range. Maybe 8 if you count the third one, that, like, the third darkest, that, like, looks white to me still. Whatever. It's just, like, it's in poor taste. They had the money to do better, and they chose not to. And I think that says a lot about them as a company. Like, they could have done better. They just chose not to. And if you watch Jackie Ina's video that she filmed with Alyssa Ashley, like, the dark shades that they have are a joke. It's not even like they're... Here's what I was thinking. If this was a very new brand, fresh to Sephora, maybe not even in Sephora, they had no idea if this foundation would sell. It would make sense to me if they had a small range where it was mainly the mid-tone shades and maybe 1 or 2 dark shades and 1 or 2 light shades. And then that would be okay. I would understand that because it's new. If it was a brand that was around a little longer, I would understand if they had like maybe 3 pale shades and 3 dark shades, but they were able to be mixed so that you could find your right color. You just might have to buy more than one. Like if they had like the darkest dark and the lightest light, and then some sort of range in between, that would make sense. What Tarte did is they picked an ashy shade, an orange shade, and a slightly darker orange shade, I think. Or maybe 2 of them are ashy. Like, they didn't even try to make it usable. I don't even know if they even have a black person working for them that they even attempted to swatch on. Like, I genuinely don't think a color of person... Color of person? What? Person of color? Whatever. I don't think a single person of color was involved in the making of those. And then I was thinking about, I was like, what if it's a situation where there's like 1 or 2 people of color that were hired as like the staple black person to be involved, and that person was in a situation where they recognized that the shades weren't good and that there wasn't enough representation, but they felt like they couldn't say anything because if they say anything they could be demoted or lose their job. You know what I mean? Like, it's like it would threaten their job to stand up, and it's really shitty if they put 1 or 2 people to represent billions of people, and it's like it's all on their shoulders. Like, it shouldn't be that way. I don't know how many people of color were working on that product specifically, but what it seems like to me is it's either a room full of white people or a room full of white person and 1 or 2 uncomfortable black people that have to have the job of sort of being the voice for billions of people without overstepping boundaries, even though it's the right thing to do. So, I don't know. It's just like, it irritates me that they either didn't include people of color or they put people of color in an uncomfortable position where they couldn't speak up. That's what pisses me off. So, I'm really not interested. The Tarte Shape Tape, I got a sample of it and I was like, oh my god, this is so good. And it is really good, but you know what? It's really not worth my morals. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather invest in concealers and foundations from other high-end brands who care. Like, I feel like because of that, now I want to go out and buy a Fenty foundation. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how it makes me feel.
I wanted to clarify that I'm not saying this as if Tarte's the only brand, and I'm not saying that I haven't purchased from brands with smaller shade ranges before. I just feel that following Fenty Beauty, it's very ignorant of brands to not recognize the requirement for larger shade ranges and the demand for it. and also it doesn't make sense, specifically because this was a highly anticipated release. If this was a release from a company who wasn't sure about how the reception would be, or it was from a smaller brand that didn't have the money to invest in it, then I could understand. But in these circumstances and in this specific time period, right after following the Fenty Beauty and during a time in American history where people are speaking up more about racial injustice, it was very ignorant on their part.
And, like, we can sit around and argue back and forth about whether or not it's racist. That's not the point. The point is they had the money to do better, and they chose not to because they don't give a fuck. And that's the fucking truth. Like, how else do you explain a company, like, Tarte has so much space at Sephora. Like, you have to be really successful to get that much space at Sephora on the shelves. So there's no excuse for it. And they could have at least, if they, like, weren't sure if it would sell at Sephora, you can have a wider shade range online. Like, then at least there could be a situation where it's like maybe part of the blame could go on the distributors or retailers or whatever. Like, then you could say, oh, we wanted to sell all these shades in store, but, you know, Sephora rules. And then people can get on Sephora's ass about it. They could have done that. But they didn't. You know why? Because they don't give a fuck. And you know what? I don't give a fuck about Tarte. So there we go.
Something I don't buy is that they are trying to act like they started to make those 5 shades or 10 shades after people wanted it, but I don't think they can make shades that fast. So I think what happened is they prepared for this and they intentionally released a small range at the beginning. So they already had a larger range for dark shades and they chose not to release it. And regardless of what their idea behind that was, it made it feel like people of color are an afterthought, which is unacceptable.